Welcome to another episode of the Holistic Sister Circle. Today we have Lyn here with us, and she is an energy healer, somatic practitioner, certified hypnotist, and the founder of the Unapologetically Me Movement. She is passionate about helping women break free from cycles of self sacrifice, overgiving, and people pleasing that leave them burned out, exhausted, and sick so they can honor their own needs unapologetically. Lyn, I am so grateful that you're here. This is such a good topic, and I cannot wait to talk about it with you.
Yeah, I'm so excited to chat.
Awesome, awesome. So, to kick us off, I would love for you to just share your journey. And if you were this person that was doing the people pleasing, if that, or if if that was the case, please
Mhm.
share with us. Let us know what that process looked like for you.
Yeah, so I think for most of my life, definitely could identify as a people pleaser. And I probably wouldn't have identified with that label necessarily. I just thought that I was nice. I thought, I was being a good person. As a kid, maybe just a good girl, like kind of doing what people were asking of me. And I think some of it came from how I was brought up, as is the case for so many of us, what we learn from our parents and those around us of like, how do we fit into society? What should we do? How should we behave to be accepted, to be loved, to get all of the things that we're kind of designed to seek? And I think also I to add on to it, I went through a lot of bullying as a child. And so I also kind of learned, on top of being a people pleaser, I learned to shrink myself into kind of smaller spaces, keeping my voice more quiet because I just didn't want to be a target to other people. Right. So people pleaser plus shrinking into myself. And I would say I probably lived with those patterns for, into my early 30s, probably, honestly. And then when I met my husband, I started to realize certain things. And it was interesting how our relationship really illuminated some of those things for me. Like he said, "You call your mother every day. Like, is that something you actually want to do?" And I was like, "No." But don't I have, it was kind of like this feeling, but don't I have to? And he was like, "That's really not a normal thing to do. Like, do you want to do it?" It's kind of one of those slightly embarrassing things to publicly share, but I share it because, I think sometimes we don't even realize what we're doing in these situations. And once he said that, I was like, "Oh, I don't have to do this thing," and there was some pushback from my mom when I changed our pattern because she liked it. She wanted to talk to me every day. But it was part of my growth and my journey to be like, I'm going to set some boundaries here and we don't have to talk every single day. And I think the other part of my big part of my journey and the other part of my story was to just realize how much of these patterns, like how they really affect our lives, especially as women, in such profound ways. And kind of to come back to my mom. So my mom was kind of the ultimate caregiver in her life. And so I watched her, really take care of other people. She took care of my grandparents when I was a kid, watched her even do that, through my teen years with my grandma. She took care of me when I had some health issues in my 20s. She took care of my dad. And I started to realize that this was coming at a cost, and ultimately kind of got the real wake up call last year when she passed away from kidney failure and from kind of poorly managed diabetes. And, granted, she was in her late 70s, but I think if she had taken better care of herself and if she hadn't kind of been in a way, a people pleaser through being a caregiver in that way, I don't think that would have been her time.
Wow. You said, first of all, I'm so sorry about your mom, and
Thank you.
my heart definitely goes out to you and your family. You said so many different things that I just want to unpack for a second. I'm
Sure.
like, hold on, wait a second. My brain is going a mile a minute. The first thing that I wanted to talk about, because I could totally relate to this, is I was like that growing up, where I felt like I had to do the right thing, or there was always a right or a wrong way to do things. And I remember it's so funny because my husband, he had two girls prior to our relationship. And when I first met the girls and we were, getting to know each other and having a conversation, one of the questions that they would ask me was, they would be like, "Miss B, like, did you ever get in trouble as a kid? And as I'm thinking about it, I'm like, I think I had maybe one good spanking, and I learned my lesson, and I never acted up again because I was like, I don't like the way that makes me feel. I don't like getting hit. Like,
Right.
so,
Or I just don't like people being angry at me. I
I'm
mean,
just
I didn't really get a lot of spankings either, but I just didn't
right.
like if
I was
my
like,
mom would get upset, I was like, ugh,
yeah,
you
I was
know?
like, I don't like that. So I'm just going to continue to do what I'm supposed to do so that doesn't happen again.
Right.
And when I started obviously dating their dad, one of the things that he had shared with me that I didn't even know, I wasn't even aware of, where he's like, why does it feel like everybody that you're either with? I know my mom used to tell me this too when I was younger. She would say, everyone that you're hanging with, it just seems like you are a reflection of them. Like you're always acting like them.
Mm.
And
Mhm.
then when we started dating and, as we got serious in our relationship, one of the things he would always say was, why do you feel like you have to shrink yourself? Like, why do you, like, you know, you are your own person. I want you to express yourself. I want you to be vulnerable with me. But why does it feel like I always have to pull it out of you? And
Mhm.
I share this because I can totally relate to where you're coming from because I'm now, again, in my early 30s and I'm learning this in real time of, oh, wow, like, I don't need to shrink myself to have a conversation, or, I do have something to say and people actually want to hear what I have to say and they actually care what I
Right.
have to say. But growing up, I always felt like I didn't have um, that wherewithal, or I didn't feel like I could speak up for myself because I wasn't sure how people would receive it. And if they received it in a
Right.
bad way, then I felt like I was a bad person, or, I wasn't giving them what they needed. So I could totally relate to this. And my question for you is, through this process and learning, of course, and having other people kind of shed some light onto the things that you were going through, like talking to your mom every single day, I was doing the same thing and had to set that boundary, like, hey mom, like I actually have a man now, like I can't just keep talking to you every day.
That's exactly what happened. My husband is like, I don't think I want a relationship with a woman who's always going to be like, Mom.
That's what our relationship was. And I remember, like, us having those conversations behind closed doors, like, you really like, and I'm like, okay, like what do I tell her? She's so used to us talking every day, like we're
She's going to
besties.
be mad,
And
right?
honestly, that's what happened. That's exactly what happened. We went
Mine
through
too.
we went through this, oh my gosh, it was a process. Like I felt like I was pruning, and in this pruning period, I actually had like a breakdown. I was having panic attacks and all these different things because I felt like the relationship that we had, one, it wasn't healthy when you obviously now have a man in your life, but then two, I was so dependent on that was literally like my almost like my reason for being. And I had to
Mhm.
essentially, as I removed myself and set those boundaries, I had to like fully recover into this new version of myself outside of my mother and what her, expectations of me
Expectations.
were, which is so bizarre. But I would, obviously, I would love to know your perspective on that and like, how did you move through it?
It certainly, was kind of a similar thing. First, like she wasn't happy. I think I was also like, she's not gonna like Michael very much,
Oh yes,
like
it was like, you taking my daughter away from me, right? Like,
exactly. I was like, when
yeah,
she, because she hadn't even met him in person or anything at that point. It was like, how's that gonna go? And I had to just also kind of find that internal strength too to kind of like weather that, because I think the reason, maybe if there was any inkling in me before that wasn't something I wanted, that I avoided saying it in the first place, was I was like, oh, that's really uncomfortable. I'd rather stay in this pattern that's kind of like, I don't love it, but it just felt familiar
right.
to me, rather than stepping out of that and being like, okay, I'm going to stand on my own 2 feet and say, like, I love to talk to you, mom, but let's talk when we have things to talk about, not just like a day. Because it was, he probably had the same thing. What do you have to talk about every single day?
Absolutely.
Like,
Gossip, like,
yeah, gossip, or TV shows,
right,
or your chores that you did. Like, our lives for the most part on a daily basis are pretty repetitive. It's like we work, we do the usual things. I was like, maybe we can talk when there's actually something exciting to talk about or something that we really want to share. And it's funny because after a while, like I was always like, but you can always call me if there's something up you want to talk. She wouldn't initiate. It kind of felt like there was still this like passive aggressive, I guess, response of like, I'm not going to call you. And then when I would call her, sometimes she'd be like, well, what's up? Like, not, hey, good to hear from you. I'm really happy that, to hear from my daughter, how are you? It was like, well, what's going on? Like, I can't just call you to say hi, or, there has to be like, I'm in the emergency room, or my life is blowing up,
Hey, you know what? I'm just like, this is such a good topic because I do believe a lot of mothers and daughters do go through this. I mean, I have so many friends as well, obviously not in the same scenario, but maybe they feel like their mom. I have one friend, her mom's always asking her, well, when are you getting married? When are you having children? And it's like, mom, like I literally not even dating. Like, do you have some eligible bachelors for me? Like, can you help me out in this area? Or it might be a situation where, obviously my parents divorced when I was literally 9 years old. So I felt like, after my dad, it was like, obviously my mother's children, we became her life. And
Right.
she just didn't really have a life outside of us. So not only did it cause friction with, our relationship because it was no longer going to be that way, but it
Right.
also caused friction in, my relationship with my spouse as well. Because it's like, okay, you have a family, but now I'm your family, right? And
Right.
now like we have different things that we need to do for our family.
Right.
And we love your mom, we have no problem with her. But at the same time, I'm the man of my house. And these are the things that I want to make sure that we address, especially as we move further into our relationship as a couple. And I think, this is one topic that is really important, especially for those who may be new, maybe you've been in a really long-term relationship, or maybe you are married and you all are living together now and you're trying to figure out that constant denominator because you and your mom grew to be so close and like you were best friends, and now you're essentially breaking up that relationship.
Yeah.
It's a breakup. Like
I think that's a fair assessment. It is like going through a breakup, and it's like one person doesn't really want to have the breakup,
I know.
like
And
the status quo.
what's funny too? So I also, I went home this past weekend and I hadn't seen my mom in 3 years. And I was so grateful to have that time with her and, to connect with her. But I also felt like it was so much missed time that we also didn't really know how to connect, because how we would connect prior was completely different. So now it's like we have to find a new way to connect with each other that actually makes sense for both of us. So I would love to hear that from you too. Like, what were some different things that you and your mom did to really reconnect in a new way, so you all could have a relationship that wasn't awkward, like you were saying, when you would call and she would be like, "What's that? Like, why are you calling me now? Your man's there."
Yeah. Yeah, I think in some ways it never quite recovered, in the same way. Like I'm hoping you're finding more success with that. I think, with my mom, it was just kind of having to come to peace with, like, she had an expectation of how it was going to be, and she maybe wasn't thrilled with that change, and she just had to come to be like, I guess this is Lyn's life and this is how she's going to live it. And I still expressed care for her. I still, would communicate with her in other ways as well, and just checking in, like, hey, how's it going? What's, we haven't touched base in a while. Like, what's going on in your life? But I think sometimes that inclined her more, like, at certain points to hide things from me. Like at one point, I think it was 3 years ago, I actually flew up to visit my parents before they had moved to be closer to us. And I was like, I don't even know, like, how are they? Like, I didn't tell them I was coming, to basically do an honest assessment of them, in their senior years of like, what aren't they telling me?
That's a big one for sure. Now, I would love to switch gears here for a second and just would love for you to just share with us as well. What are some things that you've noticed for those who are, have seen that maybe they do have these people pleasing tendencies, whether they're just wanting to make sure everyone is good and safe and well secured? What are some of the downfalls of this? Because one of the things, even in my relationship, that we always talk about as well is, you know, you're so neutral. Like, pick a side. Like, people
That
are going to hate you or love you regardless, but
right.
stand in your square and pick your side and be comfortable picking your side. And one of the reasons why I honestly, and one of the many reasons why I started this podcast was so I could actually get into the rhythm of getting comfortable with getting uncomfortable of picking a side. And
Nice.
this has really allowed me to like open up, speak my truth, things of that nature. And I started from a podcast perspective of interviewing other people because I still really wasn't quite ready to like put myself out there. But I said, if I do it with a friend, it's more of a conversation and it can naturally flow. And now I'm
Right.
at a point where I'm like, no, like I actually want to share more about my morals and my values and what I believe and not feel like I'm pigeoned on, someone else's, expectations of what I should be doing or how I should be acting. So I would, love to know your perspective with that as well.
Yeah, kind of like the downsides of these types of behaviors.
Exactly.
At the extreme, I think as I told the story of my mom, it certainly, can cost us our health and our well-being. Like if we're constantly not even checking in with ourselves, like, am I exhausted? Like, am I taking care of myself? Because we're so conditioned to focus on how are you? How are you? How are you? What do you need? What do you need? And then it's not coming back to what do I need? So, that's at the more extreme end. I think, sometimes it's just costing us our voices, like you said, staying small, not really expressing your truth. I mean, I know, growing up, as I shared, with being bullied, being kind of made to feel small, I never felt safe to express myself either, and I would kind of keep things vanilla. People were always like, oh, she's so shy, like she's just shy. And I think for me, shy was, I don't know if I really was shy. I think I was just in a protective pattern. Like my nervous system didn't feel safe to be like, I think this, or,
Say, yeah.
this is how I am, So I was like, I'll just hide in the corner and, like, oh, I don't know. What do you think? So it costs us our voices. It costs us, if we have like a business or we have something we're passionate about, like it really costs people being able to see the real us. Because what I'm finding is the more I step into that real me and the more I'm like, putting out social media content and doing things that are like the truer expression of me, not like this polished, this is like what Lyn should be, but it's like, this is who Lyn really is. People are like, oh, I want to lean in. Like you're interesting to me. I can relate to you versus like, oh, she's just, I guess, nice. Like, I don't know. There's
She's
nothing that
nice.
stands out. Yeah. The nice word. Yeah.
No, and this is so good because like I said, I can totally relate to this as well. So we talked about the downside of it. What do you believe has been just something that you felt like, whether yourself or just clients that you've worked with, some just, practical steps. Like if someone were going through this, obviously they spent 20, 30 years developing these patterns and these habits. What would you say would be the first thing that someone should really do to step into their worth and to enter their voice, to truly own it and be
Yeah.
open to standing 10 toes in what they believe in?
Yeah. I think the kind of the first part of what I do when I work with people, and this is, part of my own journey as well, is really about what we feel safe with in our nervous system. So we have to kind of start with that because for so many of us, the idea of, being seen, expressing our voice, not just being, nice or or having an opinion that maybe not everyone's going to agree with, we get those feelings in our body, our knots in our stomach, and our palms get all kind of sweaty and our heart's racing. And it's like, oh, this is really uncomfortable. And our bodies don't really know the difference between that and, it's perceiving it just like a wild tiger ready to like eat us alive, So we have to get that part of us to be like, hey, I'm safe. Like, it's okay. It's safe to start to change this pattern. So I use a lot of kind of nervous system techniques. It can even just be as simple as, learning how to do some slow breathing, because that's one of the simplest ways that people can start to kind of calm down that fight or flight response. It's just breathe, girl, breathe. Like, let yourself, come into your body and be like, I know it feels like this is going to kill me. If I say, no to somebody, if I start voicing my opinion, but it's not, I'm safe. And we just kind of rewire that safety into the body. And then we also work with a lot of beliefs. I work with people with a lot of beliefs, because it's like we have all these old conditionings. That's kind of where hypnosis, I think, is a powerful way to do that, because basically in the first 7 years of our lives, we kind of were conditioned, right? So we walked around, they say, actually, when you're under the age of 7, you kind of are in a hypnotic state. You're highly suggestible, and that makes it so we learn really quickly. So it's kind of like you're learning the operating system of the world that you live in. You're like, oh, this is the rules of like how to get approval, how to get my needs met, how to be safe. And we have to go in there and really look at, well, what do you believe? Like, oh, if I express my voice, if I say what I think, what do you think is going to happen? And is that what you really want to believe? Because for most of us, it's, if you think of what that is, it's like, that's not really how I want to continue to live the rest of my life, thinking, if I say what I think, other people are going to be mad. They're not going to like me. They're going to basically make me an outcast of the tribe,
Yeah, absolutely. And it's so relatable, because I talk a lot about this in my content now as I'm sprouting into more of a personal brand, but I talk about my experience just having a sensitive gut. And one of the things that have really stood out to me in this period is when I was diagnosed with irritable bowel syndrome, a lot of that work that I had to do was emotional. It was a lot of emotional work. It was a lot of me like hoarding onto things that I just didn't want to talk about. And, I know you talked about the health part of it, but that literally, it affected my health, my relationships, my career.
Very much.
Because I wasn't communicating in a way that was sustainable for me and for the people around me. And it got to the point where it literally caused me so much physical pain that I was like, if I don't talk, I will literally die. That is it's literally life or death.
Body is screaming at you basically at that point. Hello.
Like, you need to have these conversations. So like I said, I love this topic, Lyn, and I'm so grateful that we had an opportunity to connect with you. Now, if anyone was looking to connect with you further, can you tell us what that process looked like?
Yeah, so I would suggest checking out my website, which is heartfirehealingllc.com. I'm sure you'll probably link to it somewhere. And you can go there. I have a really cool quiz that I just developed that I recommend you take. It's specifically for like empath sensitives, which most of the people I talk to are. And it really helps you understand like what's the survival pattern linked to why it's hard for you to, say no, why it's hard to have boundaries in the world. So it's a really fun one. So you can check that out on my website. And then you can also just, peruse around. And there's a way, if you're interested in reaching out and booking a call, you can also do that on my site as well.
I love that. I'm going to take that quiz. I'll let you know what my results are.
I'd be curious what you got, because there's basically 4 different types of, responses that you can get. And I'd be curious, are you a sponge? Are you a fixer? Are you an overdoer or a peacemaker? Those are the 4 types.
I mean, without even taking the quiz, I do overdo for sure. But we'll see. We'll see what it says.
Yeah, yeah, it's interesting because sometimes it's like, well, I feel like maybe that one or that one. So it'll be
Right.
interesting to see, you know, what light it sheds for you on the dominant pattern. Obviously, you could
Yeah,
have a secondary one as well.
of course, of course. Well, Lynn, thank you again so much for your time. Until next time.